What's up, guys? Welcome into the NFL DFS Week 10 Fantasy Football Game Preview DFS DraftKings Edition. Today, we're going to be going over our best values in GPP stacks for upcoming week of Week 10 in the NFL. So let's dive right in. So one of my favorite players on the slate this week is Devin Singletary. He's coming in at $5,000 on DraftKings for Week 10. And it's interesting because in this matchup, the Browns are favorites at home despite being 2-6 versus a 6-2 Bills squad. Singletary has now seen at least twice as many targets and snaps as Frank Gore. He's seen 10 targets and third most routes run on the team over the past 2 weeks. So we're definitely seeing an uptick in work for Devin Singletary. So I do think that he is someone that's an option. He's cheap. He's at $5,000. Is a running back that has a 3-down skill set. The only concern about rostering Singletary is goal line work. Singletary has 6 touches versus goals, 4 touches in the red zone the last 2 weeks. But if you look at those carries, he has 23 carries over the past 2 weeks versus Gore's 20. But Singletary has been much more productive. He's averaging 5 yards per carry versus Gore's 2.4 yards per carry. So there's a couple different scenarios. The Browns are definitely a team that can be beat on the ground. So I do think that Singletary has upside there. And then, for some reason, like Vegas is predicting the Browns are winning in this game, Devin Singletary will be in there as the pass-catching back. So I do like Devin Singletary as a guy to roster in your lineups. The other cheap running back value play I like is David Montgomery. $5,300. He's one of the fewer other lower price running backs on the slate that you can have confidence in playing this week. Montgomery has put up 24.7 and 22.6 points the last 2 weeks, with him seeing a 70% offensive snap share. Against the Detroit Lions, who are allowing the most PPR points per game to running backs, Montgomery is in a great spot. He's also involved in the passing game with 9 targets over the past 2 weeks. He has more catches, targets, and routes run than Tariq Cohen over that time span. Montgomery has also led the Bears with 19 red zone touches and 13 touches inside the 5-yard line this season. Those 13 touches inside the 5 rank second highest in the NFL. So I think both of these guys are kind of the lower end running backs that you want to utilize to get up to a guy like Christian McCaffrey. So as we build a lineup here, as you can see, if you guys go to the video at windailysports.com, is basically you'll find that, okay, we're going to start, building a lineup here. And I'm going to start with, putting in my guy Singletary. He's coming in at $5,000. So I'm going to put him into our little lineup generator here. And then I'm going to put in Christian McCaffrey in the flex. Remember, guys, if you have a player playing in a late game, you want to put him in your flex position so you can, if you need to pivot off of that player, you can move it to either a running back or receiver, especially with McCaffrey because his salary is so high. If you put him in your flex, it allows for a lot of different opportunities of things that you can make and adjustments you can make as the week kind of carries out. So now going into some of my favorite stacks for Week 10. So again, there are 2 games that people are going to be targeting heavily. It's going to be the Falcons and Saints game and the Buccaneers and Cardinals game. And I highly recommend that you try to have bits and pieces of each of these games in your lineups, whether they're in tournaments or in cash games. So for Atlanta, Matt Ryan, 6,100, it's definitely a GPP play. Basically every Falcons quarterback has thrown for over 300 yards in a game this year. Even when Matt Ryan was injured, Matt Schaub came out and threw for 450 yards. So Matt Ryan is a guy that I really think is someone that's going to probably be underwhelmed and, undervalued basically because he's coming off an injury. And a lot of players kind of tend away from the injuries of especially the quarterback position when there's a lot of other good quarterbacks on this slate that people may be more inclined to roster in their lineup. So Matt Ryan, 6,100, I'm going to lock him in here to this build as our starting quarterback there at 6,100. I mean, he's $100 more than Jacoby Brissett. He's really cheap for his price, and based on the fact that he's averaging 24.2 fantasy points per game. If you actually look at the salary from a fantasy points per game perspective, he actually ranks number 2 on the slate in terms of fantasy points per game, only behind Lamar Jackson, and he's $1,200 cheaper than Lamar Jackson. So again, now you want to stack Matt Ryan with some of his receivers. So I'm not going to be able to fit in Julio just because of his price, and I want to play Christian McCaffrey. So I'm going to go down to Calvin Ridley at $5,400. Calvin Ridley has a great track record against the Saints. In 2 games last year versus New Orleans, Ridley averaged 10.5 targets, 7.5 receptions, and 119.5 yards with 2 touchdowns. So Ridley has scored 4 touchdowns in his career versus the Saints. Julio Jones has played in 15 games versus the Saints. Julio Jones has scored just 3 touchdowns in his career versus the Saints. they just know how to keep him out of the end zone. That's what I'm going to chalk it up to. So I do like Ridley, especially at his price that's lower. I think that he's a great piece to have in any type of cash build or even in a GPP lineups. Now moving on to the other game. Before we actually get off the Cardinals or the Falcons game, I do want to kind of add a little bit more to this stack as we're kind of building a GPP lineup here. So we have another running back spot, so I'm going to be adding in Alvin Kamara. I think he's obviously the best. He's back and healthy. He's going to see a significant workload. Obviously, Latavius Murray might be able to bite in, but we've seen what Kamara can do from an efficiency standpoint. So I'm going to be locking in Alvin Kamara there at my second running back spot, and then adding in a guy like Ted Ginn. He's real cheap. He's at $3,700. He helps us fit in some of the studs that we want. And he's in a good spot. The Saints are at home. And if you look at, Ted Ginn, in the past, what he's done, essentially Ted Ginn in the past versus the Saints, he's actually had a pretty good game. He had 70 receiving yards and a touchdown the last time he played the Saints at home. So I do like Ted Ginn as kind of a contrarian play in a spot where there should be a lot of points scored. So Ted Ginn is locked in there as our next spot. Now, if we move along to the other popular game of the slate, that is between the Cardinals and the Tampa Bay Bucks. And if for our build here, it's hard for us to get into guys like Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, but I think those are guys that you definitely need to consider with other builds. Kyler Murray at 6,500 is definitely my favorite guy to play in cash games. I think that he is in an excellent spot. But for here, we're going to go with a guy, Christian Kirk, 5,200. He's Murray's number one target, and you can have him. If you play Kyler Murray, he's obviously a nice stack, but he's still a player that's going to be featured a lot in a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who rank dead last in the NFL in points allowed to the wide receiver position. So we're going to slot in our guy Christian Kirk here at $5,200. And now that leaves us with just the tight end and defensive special teams. So we're not going to be just leaving alone this game yet. We have one more player to play from here, and that's O.J. Howard. He's coming in at $3,300. Look, guys, we all have been disappointed by O.J. Howard this season. He's basically done nothing. I can't even find him on here because his fantasy points per game must be so low. But I'm looking for O.J. Howard. And basically, I'm buying into the flowchart narrative. You have a guy that we know his athletic upside with O.J. Howard. So we are going to play him. I'm playing him in seasonal leagues. I'm not going to miss out on O.J. Howard. I was talking him up all the offseason. I'm not going to miss out on a breakout game that he could have. And if it's ever going to happen, it's going to happen against the Cardinals. So I'm playing O.J. Howard. He's cheap enough where, okay, even if he doesn't blow up, his projection versus all the other tight ends is probably going to be pretty close. So I really feel fine playing O.J. Howard. And I think that he might come in at lower ownership because people are just off of him totally. But I think that the matchup is really, really good. He's playing in one of the highest scoring games of the slate. And, if Mike Evans or Chris Godwin ever has a down game, then it's probably going to be because of O.J. Howard. So, things are bound to, look up for him. I just think he's in a good spot here against the Arizona Cardinals. And Cameron Brate's banged up. So we're not even sure if Cameron Brate's even going to go. And if he doesn't go, then that's an even better shot for a guy like O.J. Howard to really kind of show up in this spot. So I am going to go with O.J. Howard at the tight end position. Also another guy you want to consider from this game is David Johnson, 5,700. He's really cheap. He says he's playing, and he apparently is going to be featured more in the slot in the passing game. So that's really why I like Kyler Murray a lot, and I think that in GPPs with Kyler Murray, you want to stack him with David Johnson and Christian Kirk for the kind of ultimate upside, and it's a pretty cheap stack for a guy that's playing in one of the most highest scoring games of the slate. And then if you really want to get wild in some large field GPPs, go with Damiere Byrd, 3,400. He's probably the best deep threat. And even though Andy Isabella kind of flashed in that Thursday night game, the reports have kind of come out that he's not going to see more snaps because of one play. Damiere Byrd is definitely in the starting role above him, but he was hurt last week. So now moving on to another guy that's in a really good spot this week who's also coming off an injury. Again, guys, you want to buy the injury discounts on DFS, not necessarily season long because obviously they can come up and kind of haunt you, but people will just not play guys because they're injured. I want to see it after another week, which, look, if you did that with Drew Brees, you got burned. Brees absolutely lit it up, and I just think it's worth the risk because that's what you're doing in GPPs anyway. You're trying to, look at risk, and I think that, just playing good guys at the end of the day is kind of the ultimate way to win. Don't try to get too cute. So Patrick Mahomes, $7,000. He looks like he's going to be playing he's going to play this week. So he's the best quarterback in the league. And the Titans just lost Malcolm Butler. And if you can get the best quarterback in the NFL coming in at a lower ownership, you need to jump on that ASAP. So exactly same scenario as Matt Ryan. But again, I really like Patrick Mahomes in the spot in GPPs. Over the past 2 weeks, the Titans have allowed the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Tyreek Hill, 7,700. Travis Kelce, 6,400 are both nice options to pay up in GPPs. And Sammy Watkins, who basically everybody hates on the planet, he's seeing 18 targets over the past 2 weeks. So again, he's another guy that you can get in super cheap. And honestly, Christian Kirk and DJ Moore both $5,200. So Sammy Watkins is going to be like so low owned because of the options kind of around him. You got guys like DJ Moore, 5,200. You got Marquise Brown at 5,100. You got Jameson Crowder at 5,000. Like, so much better options than Sammy Watkins in this kind of $5,200, $5,100, $5,000 range, which is why no one's going to want to roster him. Which is why if you have Patrick Mahomes, I think that it's a must play to play him with Sammy Watkins because we've seen what these guys can do when they really make it. And that's kind of a contrarian play, I guess. But I will go over some more contrarian plays I have. And my strongest contrarian play is for my guy, Mitchell Trubisky, $5,100 in DFS. I already got some slack on Twitter for posting about, some of these stats. But again, I'm just reading off the stats, and this is what the numbers tell me. So the Lions over the past 4 weeks have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Trubisky has had a ton of success versus the Lions in the past. He's thrown for over 300 passing yards in his last 2 games against them. He's only thrown for 300 or more yards 5 times in his career. 5 times. And he's done it twice against the Bears, or against the Lions. So the reason the Lions have been so bad on defense is their lack of pass rush. They're generating pressure on just 19% of quarterback dropbacks this season. This is the biggest thing, guys. Like, quarterbacks suck all the time, but it's because they're under pressure. Look, you don't need to be good if you have all the time in the world to throw. Guys will just get open. And he has some receivers that are decent enough that can get open. Taylor Gabriel has big games. Allen Robinson's a stud. Anthony Miller has flashed in the past. He can throw it to guys when they're open. And we already talked about how David Montgomery is going to run all over the Lions defense. If they start doing some play action stuff, Mitchell Trubisky could absolutely rip up this Lions defense. It's not that good. So don't lock into take lock about guys. Look, I'm not a huge Trubisky fan. I'm not like a Trubisky truther or anything, but he's in a good spot here. They're at home. He's dominated the Lions in the past. He's super cheap. No one is going to play him. Trubisky won people millions of dollars last year in the Millionaire Maker. Guys, a guy played 5 Bears and he won the Millionaire Maker. Buy Trubisky this week. Literally no one is going to play him, but he could not be in a better spot. And especially, it's just kind of the narrative. He's trying to tune out the noise. He knows the pressure's on. But this is a matchup that they can exploit. So we see this all the time with bad quarterbacks. They just win. Someone won $1 million with Brock Osweiler last year. It's not because he's good, but it's just things make it really easy. A couple broken passes here. And we've already seen a game of Trubisky throw 3 touchdowns, against the Redskins. So I'm going to be playing Mitchell Trubisky in my GPPs. And, if I get burned, I get burned. But I'm going to play him. You want to stack Trubisky with Allen Robinson again, who's also coming off a cheap game. People are off of him, $6,300 last year versus the Lions. He had 6 receptions for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns. Anthony Miller could also be a really interesting punt play at $3,500. His best game in 2018 was versus the Lions when he went for 122 yards. And also, if you're going to bring it back, I think that Ty Johnson, 4,100 is pretty interesting. He still leads the team in rushing percentage and snaps played. The Bears have been terrible against the run. Over the past 4 weeks, the Bears have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. And I'm not huge into the Detroit receivers in this spot. The Bears have allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to receivers over the past 4 weeks. However, TJ Hawkinson, 3,900, has a great matchup with the Bears, allowing the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends over the past 4 weeks. And this will bring me to my last contrarian play, guys. And this is someone that I think that you should kind of just try to roster in GPPs, is Odell Beckham Jr. So he's coming in at $6,100, which is his lowest price since his rookie year. Baker Mayfield has come and said they're always going to force feed the ball to Beckham. So at the price, I'm going to buy the narrative for week 10. Look, Beckham is just a really good player, and we saw last week he beat Chris Harris multiple times. He was open for a touchdown at the end of the game, and just Baker Mayfield didn't throw it to him. So if you're going to tell me Baker Mayfield's going to get 20 targets in this game and just be hyper-targeted, there are sometimes receivers get hot, and they just can't be covered. And look, Tre'Davious White's a good cornerback, but I think Odell Beckham is better. So I'm going to play Odell Beckham in GPP. He's going to be super low-owned again, but he's going to get targets. And, the Bills have actually, as an offense, a lot of their targets go to the receptions of receivers. So a lot of receptions and targets for the receiver position. We haven't seen a lot of touchdowns, but again, Odell Beckham has just got 1 touchdown this year. That's definitely something that's going to regress. And the same thing with Baker Mayfield. For the amount of work that he's seen, the amount of passes he's thrown, the amount of yards he's thrown for, he's running cold when it comes to the when it comes to touchdowns. So I think that Baker Mayfield is going to regress positively in the touchdown department. I think that's going to benefit a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. So now as we look at the, our lineup here, we've got Matt Ryan, Devin Singletary, Alvin Kamara, Calvin Ridley, Ted Ginn, Christian Kirk, OJ Howard, Christian McCaffrey in the flex. And at defense special teams, we got $2,600 left, and we have just enough to fit my favorite player in here, is the Steelers defense. They will literally have the best matchup in terms of offensive line versus defensive line. The Steelers defense is really good. Their defensive line is really good. And the Rams offensive line is really bad. They've getting blown up, constantly left and right. And Jared Goff's on the road, guys. Jared Goff on the road is a turnover slot machine. You don't want to play Jared Goff on the road. So you want to play defenses that face him. At $2,600, he is way too cheap. So Steelers defense, lock them in, guys. All right, so thanks again, guys, for watching on YouTube. Again, we're at windailysports.com, and thanks for listening.